My dad forced me to drop out of college so the family could fund my brother's startup. I refused and graduated on my own. Years later, they showed up asking me to get him a job or give him money because nothing worked out for him. I, 28 male, grew up in a pretty standard middle-class household in Michigan. Dad worked as a regional sales manager for an industrial supply company. Mom was a dental hygienist. Nothing fancy, but we weren't struggling either. Two-car garage, annual camping trips, the whole suburban package. My brother Cameron is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he could talk, he was the golden child who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. See, I was the boring kid. Got decent grades, stayed out of trouble, played baseball until I realized I wasn't going pro, then focused on school. Pretty standard stuff. No drama, no excitement, just a kid trying to figure out his life. Cameron, though, that kid had personality. Translation. He was loud, charming, and knew exactly how to work a room. Could talk his way out of anything. Always had some grand plan or big idea, and my parents ate it up like he was the next Steve Jobs. When I brought home a B+ on a history test, Dad would glance at it and nod. When Cameron scraped by with a C-, they'd celebrate his improvement and take him out for ice cream. I'm not exaggerating. This actually happened multiple times. High school was more of the same. I joined the robotics club, made solid grades, started thinking about college. Cameron joined. Nothing, barely passed his classes, but somehow became student body president by promising to get better cafeteria food and longer lunch breaks. He delivered on neither, but people loved him anyway. The favoritism wasn't subtle. When I needed money for college application fees, Dad made me work extra shifts at the hardware store where I'd been employed since sophomore year. When Cameron wanted a car for his 16th birthday, they bought him a used Honda Civic with money they'd supposedly been saving for emergencies. I pointed out the double standard once during dinner. Mom's response, "You're more independent. Cameron needs more support to reach his potential." His potential. Right. I worked through high school, saved every dollar I could, and applied to Michigan State. Got accepted into their engineering program with a partial academic merit award that covered about 40% of tuition. The rest student loans and my savings from 2 years of hardware store wages. My parents contributed exactly nothing to my education. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because they were teaching me responsibility. Meanwhile, they'd already started talking about helping Cameron with his future plans once he graduated. Michigan State was tough, but I loved it. First time in my life, I felt like I was actually building something that was mine. Took a full course load every semester, worked part-time at the campus recreation center, and spent weekends studying instead of going to parties. Freshman year, I lived in the cheapest dorm on campus. Sophomore year, I found a room in a house with 3 other engineering students who were just as broke and focused as I was. We'd quiz each other on thermodynamics while eating instant ramen and splitting the cheapest pizza we could find. The work was brutal. Engineering isn't like other majors where you can coast on natural talent. You either put in the hours or you fail. I watched plenty of students drop out or switch majors because they couldn't handle the workload. But I kept pushing. Every exam I passed, every project I completed, felt like proof that I was building a future where I wouldn't have to beg my parents for anything ever again. Cameron graduated high school the summer before my junior year of college. Barely made it, if I'm being honest. The kid had a 2.3 GPA and no real plans beyond figuring it out. That fall, while I was taking advanced fluid dynamics and working 20 hours a week at the rec center, Cameron enrolled in community college. Lasted exactly 1 semester before dropping out because the classes were killing his creativity. The dude couldn't write a coherent paragraph or do basic algebra. But sure, let's blame the education system for stifling his genius. After dropping out, Cameron moved back home and started what he called his entrepreneurial journey. This mostly consisted of him sleeping until noon, watching business motivational videos on YouTube, and posting inspirational quotes on social media about hustling and grinding. My parents supported this completely. Dad would come home from actual work and find Cameron on the couch with his laptop, and he'd say something like, "Good to see you working hard on your dreams, son." Working hard. The kid was literally watching someone else's motivational speech about working hard while contributing nothing to the household. Meanwhile, I was killing myself trying to maintain a 3.7 GPA while working enough hours to cover my living expenses. I'd come home during breaks and see Cameron lounging around like he was on permanent vacation, and it took everything in me not to lose it. The family dinners during those visits were torture. Dad would ask me about school. I'd tell him about a particularly challenging project or exam, and he'd nod politely before turning to Cameron and asking about his business ventures. Cameron would launch into these elaborate explanations about his latest idea. One month it was a subscription box for men's grooming products. The next it was an app that would revolutionize how people found local contractors. Then it was a consulting business where he'd help other entrepreneurs optimize their brand presence. None of these ever got past the idea stage, but my parents hung on every word like he was pitching to venture capitalists instead of sitting in his childhood bedroom. The real problem started in the spring of my junior year. I had 1 year left until graduation. My grades were solid, and I'd already started looking at entry-level engineering positions. I could see the finish line. Then Dad called me on a Tuesday night. I was in my room studying for a materials engineering exam when my phone rang. Figured it was just a regular check-in call. "Jake, we need to talk about something important," he started. Already didn't like where this was going. "Cameron's got a real opportunity here. He's been working on a business plan and he's got investors interested, but he needs startup capital to really get things moving." I waited for the punchline. "We've been crunching the numbers and we think the best move would be for you to take a year off from school, come home, get a full-time job, and help contribute to Cameron's business fund. It's only temporary and it would mean everything to your brother." The silence on my end must have been loud because Dad kept talking. "You're only a year from graduating anyway. You could always go back and finish later. But Cameron's window of opportunity is right now. You understand how important timing is in business, right?" I understood that they wanted me to throw away 3 years of work, go into even more debt by deferring my loans and fund whatever nonsense Cameron had cooked up this time. "What's the business?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "It's a platform that connects freelance creatives with small businesses. Revolutionary stuff. Cameron's been developing it for months." "Has he built anything? Any actual product or service?" "Well, not yet. That's what the funding is for, to hire developers and designers. So Cameron has an idea for an app. No technical skills to build it himself, no funding and no actual business experience. And you want me to drop out of college to help pay for this?" "It's not dropping out, it's taking a strategic pause. And yes, family helps family. That's how it works." "Does Cameron know you're asking me this?" "It was actually his suggestion. He said you've always been good with money and you'd understand the opportunity here." Of course it was his suggestion. The guy who'd never worked a real job in his life thought it was perfectly reasonable for me to abandon my education so he could play entrepreneur. "I'm not doing it," I said simply. "Jake, don't be selfish about this. We're talking about your brother's future here." "I'm talking about my future, the one I've been working toward for 3 years while working and taking out loans. Cameron dropped out of community college after 1 semester. Why would I trust him with my money and my time? Because he's your brother. Because family supports each other. Because sometimes you have to sacrifice for the people you love. Like you guys sacrificed for my education. Oh wait, you didn't. I'm paying for this myself. Remember the responsibility and independence you were teaching me." Dad's voice got cold. "We're asking for 1 year. 1 year of your life to help your brother succeed. If you can't do that, then I don't know what kind of man you're becoming. The kind who doesn't throw away his future for a pipe dream." I hung up. The next few days were radio silence. Then Mom called, trying the guilt trip approach. Cameron needed this. He'd struggled so much finding his path. I'd always had it easier because I was smarter and more focused. Couldn't I just help my little brother out this one time? One time? Like it would actually be one time. I knew how this worked. If I agreed to 1 year, it would turn into 2. Then Cameron's business would fail, and it would somehow be my fault for not believing in him enough or not contributing enough. I told Mom the same thing I told Dad. No. Then Cameron himself called. This was the first time I'd heard from him directly about any of this. "Dude, what's your problem?" he started. No hello, no how are you, just straight to accusation. "My problem is you expecting me to put my life on hold for your latest idea. It's not just an idea, it's a real business opportunity. I've got people interested. I've got a plan. I just need some capital to get started. Then get a job and save the capital yourself." That's what I did. It's different for me, man. You don't get it. You're good at the traditional path, school and jobs and all that, but I'm built different. I'm an entrepreneur. I need to make moves now while the opportunity is hot. You're built different. Cameron, you dropped out of community college because you couldn't handle intro to business classes. What makes you think you can run a company? Because I have vision, I have drive, I have ideas that could change everything. You're just too stuck in your boring life to see it. My boring life where I'm about to graduate with an engineering degree and actual job prospects. Yeah, that sounds terrible. Whatever, man. When I'm successful and you're working some lame 9 to 5, don't come asking me for favors. Deal. He hung up on me that time. The family texts started after that. My aunt messaged me about how family should stick together. My uncle weighed in about how young people today don't understand loyalty. Even my grandmother called to say she was disappointed in my selfishness. The whole family had apparently been briefed on Cameron's revolutionary business opportunity and my refusal to help. They'd painted me as the villain who was holding back a future billionaire out of jealousy or spite or whatever story made them feel better. None of them asked for my side. None of them questioned why I was being asked to sacrifice my education. None of them seemed to care that I'd been supporting myself this entire time while Cameron lived rent-free at home. I stopped answering the family group chat, let them think whatever they wanted. My roommate Danny noticed I was stressed and asked what was up. I gave him the short version. His response was perfect. Your family sounds insane. Don't do it. Danny had his head on straight. He was paying his own way through school too, working as a night security guard to cover expenses. If you drop out now, you'll never go back, he said. I've seen it happen to too many people. They take a year off, life gets in the way, and suddenly they're 30 with no degree and no prospects. Don't let your brother drag you down. He was right. I knew he was right, but the pressure from my family was intense. They tried a few more times. Dad called, offering a compromise where I'd only work part-time and take a reduced course load. Still no. Mom sent long emotional texts about family bonds and supporting each other through challenges. Delete. Cameron sent me this long message about how I was ruining his life and destroying his dreams and how he'd never forgive me for this betrayal. I almost replied, but then I realized engaging would just encourage more drama. The semester ended and I went home for summer break. Mistake. I walked into a house where everyone treated me like I'd committed some unforgivable sin. Cameron wouldn't speak to me. Mom made these martyred sighs whenever I was in the room. Dad was cold and distant, giving me one-word answers when I tried talking to him. The passive aggression was thick enough to cut with a knife. Cameron's business was still in the idea phase. He had a notebook full of sketches and buzzwords, a domain name he'd purchased, and absolutely nothing else. But he spent his days in his room on video calls, supposedly networking, and building relationships with potential partners. Translation. He was chatting with other wannabe entrepreneurs who had nothing but ideas and enthusiasm. I lasted 3 days before finding a friend's couch to crash on for the rest of the summer. Got a full-time construction job to save money for my senior year and basically exiled myself from the family. Suited me fine. They wanted to be mad. Let them be mad. I had a future to build. Senior year was the hardest academically, but I barely noticed because I was so focused on getting out. Applied to dozens of jobs in the fall, went through interview after interview, and finally landed an offer in February. The interview process itself was brutal. Most companies wanted multiple rounds, phone screenings, technical assessments, panel interviews, presentations. I'd prep for hours researching each company, practicing answers to common questions, reviewing my projects and coursework. One company flew me out to their headquarters in Ohio for a full-day interview. Met with 6 different people, toured the facility, gave a presentation on a design project I'd completed. The whole time I was thinking about how much the flight and hotel would set me back if they didn't reimburse me. Thankfully they did. And 2 weeks later, they made an offer. $65,000 starting salary at a manufacturing firm downstate. Benefits, 401k, match the whole package. I signed the offer letter in my engineering lab and felt this wave of relief wash over me. I'd done it. Despite everything, despite the family pressure and the guilt trips and the accusations I'd finished the degree and secured a job, nobody could take that away from me. The final semester was weird. I was coasting academically. Already had the job lined up. Already knew I was graduating, but I couldn't quite relax. Spent most of my time helping Danny and my other roommates with their job searches, giving them interview tips, reviewing their resumes. Danny landed a position at an engineering consulting firm in Detroit. We celebrated by ordering the nice pizza for once instead of the cheap stuff we'd been surviving on for 3 years. Felt good to finally be able to afford small luxuries without the guilt. Graduation came in May. I didn't expect my family to show up, and I was right. They didn't. Danny's parents let me sit with them during the ceremony, and his mom cried when I walked across the stage. She'd met me maybe 3 times, but she cried for me anyway. After the ceremony, Danny's dad shook my hand and told me I should be proud of myself. Said, "Not everyone has the strength to choose their own path when family pressure tells them otherwise." That meant more than any congratulations from my own parents would have. I moved downstate for the job in June. Found a decent one-bedroom apartment in a complex that was mostly other young professionals. Nothing fancy, but it had a dishwasher and in-unit laundry, which felt like winning the lottery after years of student housing. Bought some basic furniture from IKEA and spent a weekend assembling everything myself. There's something satisfying about building your own furniture in your own space that you're paying for with money you earned. Each piece felt like a small victory. Started the job on a Monday in early June. The orientation was overwhelming. So many systems to learn, people to meet, protocols to memorize. But for the first time, I wasn't worried about balancing work with classes or scraping together rent money. This was just work. Show up, do the job, go home, get paid. The actual engineering work was challenging but satisfying. I was designing components for industrial machinery, conveyor systems, pneumatic controls, hydraulic assemblies, real things that would be manufactured and installed and used, not just theoretical problems in a textbook. My manager, a guy named Greg, who'd been with the company for 15 years, took me under his wing those first few months. He'd review my drawings, point out potential issues, explain the reasoning behind design decisions. Didn't talk down to me or treat me like an idiot. Just taught me the practical side of engineering that school never covers. For the first time in my life, I had financial stability. No more instant ramen budgets or choosing between textbooks and groceries. I could buy food without checking my bank account first. I could save money without it being immediately needed for tuition or rent. The first time I went to the grocery store without a strict budget, I almost had a panic attack. Spent 20 minutes in the produce section trying to convince myself it was okay to buy the fresh vegetables instead of the frozen ones. Eventually bought both because I could afford to. It felt incredible, like I'd finally made it to the other side of something. I didn't reach out to my family and they didn't reach out to me. Fine by me. I was building my own life without them. 6 months into the job, I got a LinkedIn message from Cameron. He'd apparently started 3 different business ventures since I'd graduated, and all 3 had failed within weeks of launching. The first had been that freelance creative platform he'd pitched to my parents. He'd paid someone on Fiverr to build a basic website, but never figured out how to actually attract clients or creatives. The platform launched with 0 users and stayed that way until he let the domain expire. The second was some kind of dropshipping operation selling phone accessories. He'd watched YouTube videos about passive income and decided this was his ticket. Lasted about 3 weeks before he realized you actually have to do marketing and customer service and handle returns. The negative reviews from the few customers he did get were brutal. The third was a social media consulting business where he'd supposedly helped local businesses optimize their online presence. He landed one client, a local pizza shop, and got fired after 2 weeks when they realized he was just posting random memes and couldn't explain what ROI meant. The LinkedIn message was long and rambling, but the core was basically this. He needed money for his newest idea, and could I invest in his startup? He sent me this pitch deck that looked like it had been made in PowerPoint by someone who'd never actually used PowerPoint before. The slides were painful. Lots of buzzwords like disruption and synergy and paradigm shift, charts with no actual data, a timeline that showed him becoming a millionaire within 18 months, a budget that required $50,000 in startup capital but didn't explain where any of it would go. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. The message was predictable. Cameron was struggling, needed support, and couldn't I spare a few thousand to help my brother out? It would mean the world to him. A few $1,000s for what? Another failed business idea? Another opportunity that would evaporate within weeks? I deleted the voicemail without finishing it. The requests kept coming sporadically over the next year. Sometimes from Cameron directly, sometimes from my parents, sometimes from random family members who'd been recruited to the cause. The amounts varied. Sometimes it was $5,000, sometimes $10,000. Once someone asked for $20,000, but the ask was always the same. Give Cameron money so he can keep pretending to be an entrepreneur. I never responded to any of them. Blocked Cameron on LinkedIn after he started messaging me weekly. Set my parents' numbers to go straight to voicemail. Built a wall between their drama and my peace. Year 2 at my job brought a promotion. Started as a regular project engineer. Now I was a senior project engineer managing a small team of 3 other engineers, making $78,000 a year now, which felt surreal compared to my college budget. The promotion came after I'd successfully led a redesign project for one of our major clients. They'd been having efficiency problems with their assembly line, and I'd identified the bottleneck, designed a solution, and implemented it under budget and ahead of schedule. The client was thrilled, my manager was impressed, and suddenly I had a new title and a raise. Managing people was different from just doing the work myself. Had to learn how to delegate, how to review other people's designs without being condescending, how to balance technical perfection with practical deadlines. Greg helped me navigate those first few months of leadership, sharing the lessons he'd learned over his 15 years. I actually enjoyed it. There's something satisfying about helping newer engineers avoid the mistakes you made about seeing a project come together because you coordinated the right people at the right time. Bought a used but reliable car to replace the ancient sedan I'd been driving since college. Nothing fancy, a 4-year-old Honda Accord with decent mileage, but it was mine, paid for in cash, and it didn't make concerning noises when I started it. Started contributing more to my retirement accounts. Opened a Roth IRA and began maxing it out each year. Set up automatic transfers to savings. Actually had an emergency fund instead of living paycheck to paycheck. Even took a vacation to Colorado. First real vacation of my adult life that wasn't going home for the holidays. Spent a week hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, staying in cheap hostels, eating at local diners, and just existing without thinking about work or family or obligations. Danny came with me. He'd been doing well at his consulting firm and was equally ready for a break. We spent our days on trails and our evenings comparing notes on our career progression, laughing about how far we'd come from splitting cheap pizza in our college apartment. "Remember when we couldn't afford new socks?" Danny said one night over beers at a brewery in Boulder. "Remember when we'd walk everywhere because gas was too expensive? Remember when your family tried to convince you to throw all this away for your brother's delusions?" That killed the mood a bit, but he had a point. "Yeah," I said. "I remember. You made the right call, man. Look at where you are now. Look at where you'd be if you'd listened to them." He was right. If I dropped out, I'd probably be stuck in some dead-end job watching my brother fail over and over while my parents blamed me for not supporting him enough. Instead, I was sitting in a Colorado brewery after a week of hiking with a good job, actual savings, and a future I'd built myself. Life was good. Then I got a Facebook message from my aunt. Cameron had moved back home after his 3rd failed business attempt in 18 months. He was broke, depressed, and struggling to find direction. The family was worried about him. Apparently, after the social media consulting failure, he'd tried launching a YouTube channel about entrepreneurship. The irony was lost on him giving business advice despite having never successfully run a business. The channel lasted 6 episodes before he gave up, with each video getting fewer views than the last. His most watched video had 47 views, and I'm pretty sure half of those were family members. After YouTube, he tried to become a life coach. Actually printed business cards that said, "Cameron Life Optimization Specialist." As far as I could tell, his qualifications were having opinions and access to a printer. He'd gotten exactly 0 clients. "He could really use his big brother right now," my aunt wrote. "Maybe you could talk to him, give him some guidance." The audacity was stunning. They'd spent years treating me like the bad guy for not funding his fantasies, and now they wanted me to fix the mess they'd enabled. I didn't respond to her either. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I heard more updates about Cameron. He'd gotten a job at a car dealership, lasted 2 months before quitting, because he didn't believe in traditional employment. Never mind that traditional employment is how most people pay for things like rent and food. He'd moved in with some friends he'd met at a networking event. Other aspiring entrepreneurs who spent more time talking about success than actually working toward it. They had a group chat called Future Millionaires, where they'd share motivational quotes and business ideas that never went anywhere. Cameron couldn't pay his share of rent after the first month. His roommates, despite being fellow dreamers, were practical enough to recognize a freeloader. They kicked him out after 3 months. He'd tried starting a social media marketing agency after that, but couldn't figure out how to actually market anything, even his own services. The website he built looked like it was designed in 2005, and his own social media presence was a disaster of inconsistent posting and engagement that rarely broke single digits. One mutual acquaintance told me Cameron had approached him about investing in his agency. When asked what services he offered, Cameron couldn't give a clear answer. Just kept saying things like, "I help brands optimize their digital presence." Without explaining what that actually meant, the pattern was clear. My brother had spent his entire adult life avoiding real work and real responsibility, and my parents had enabled every bit of it. Now reality was catching up, and they were shocked it wasn't working out. Meanwhile, I was thriving. Got another promotion at year 3, was making $92,000, and had been asked to lead a major project for a new client. My manager called me a rising star in the company, the rising star whose own family had written him off as selfish. Year 4 brought the intervention attempt. I came home from work one Friday to find my parents sitting in the lobby of my apartment building. The sight of them there was jarring, like seeing actors from a movie you'd forgotten about suddenly appearing in real life. How they got my address, I don't know. Probably found it through some public record or asked around mutual connections. Maybe they'd hired someone to track me down. Wouldn't put it past them at this point. Dad stood up when he saw me straightening his jacket in that way he does when he's trying to look authoritative. "Jake, we need to talk." "I don't think we do," I said, trying to walk past them toward the elevators. Mom grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Her grip was desperate, almost frantic. "Please, just give us 10 minutes, that's all we're asking." Against my better judgment, against every instinct screaming at me to keep walking, I let them into my apartment. They sat on my couch, looking uncomfortable, taking in my furniture and decor, like they were visiting a stranger, which I guess they were. We hadn't spoken in years. They'd never seen where I lived, never been part of this chapter of my life. To them, I was still probably that college kid they tried to manipulate into dropping out. The apartment was nice, though. I'd slowly upgraded from the basic IKEA furniture, adding some actual art to the walls, getting a decent TV, making the space feel like a real home. It was clear I was doing well, and I could see that realization dawning on their faces. Dad looked around at the well-furnished living room, the nice TV, the kitchen with actual appliances instead of the bare minimum. His expression shifted between something like pride and something like resentment. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally, and it didn't sound like a compliment. "Yeah, I have." Mom was crying before he even started the apology. Dad launched into his clearly rehearsed speech about how they'd handled things poorly. They understood why I was upset. They wanted to repair our relationship. Standard stuff that sounded like he'd practiced it in the mirror. His tone was all wrong, though. It wasn't actually apologetic. It was the tone you use when you're apologizing to make someone feel better, so they'll do what you want. I'd heard him use it 1,000 times with difficult clients or angry customers. Then he got to the real reason for the visit. "Cameron's in trouble, Jake. Real trouble. He's got debt, he's depressed, and he needs help getting back on his feet. We've done what we can, but you're out of money," I finished for him. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We've supported him as much as we're able, but he needs more than we can provide right now." "And you want me to give him money?" I said flatly. "We want you to give him a chance. Maybe help him get a job at your company. You must have connections now. You're doing well. You're respected in your field. A recommendation from you could mean everything. He needs a fresh start, and you're in a position to provide that." I laughed, actually laughed out loud, the sound sharp and bitter in my comfortable living room. "You want me to use my professional reputation to get Cameron a job? The same Cameron who's never held down employment for more than 2 months. The same Cameron who thinks he's too good for traditional work. You want me to recommend him to my company?" "He's changed," Mom insisted, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue who she'd pulled from her purse. "He's learned his lesson. He just needs an opportunity." "He's had nothing but opportunities," I shot back. "You gave him a car-free rent and unlimited chances to figure his life out while I was working my way through college with loans and part-time jobs. He wasted all of it, every single opportunity." "He's your brother." Mom said like that trumped everything else. "Yeah, he is, And where was my brother when I graduated? Where was he when I got my first real job? Where was he during any moment of my life that mattered? Oh, right. He was at home planning his next big idea that would never materialize. They didn't have an answer for that. The silence stretched out uncomfortable and heavy. Dad tried a different angle, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. We know we weren't there for you like we should have been. We can admit that now. We made mistakes with how we treated you, but you made it anyway. You succeeded despite not having our support. You're strong enough that you didn't need us. That's your justification. I survived your neglect, so it was okay. That's not what I'm saying, Dad backpedaled. I'm saying Cameron's not like you. He's not as resilient. He's not as driven. He needs help in ways you never did. No, Cameron needs to grow up, and you two need to stop treating him like he's incapable of surviving without someone holding his hand every step of the way. If you won't help your brother, then we have nothing more to say to you, Dad said, standing up. Sounds about right. They left. I sat on my couch for a long time afterward, feeling this weird mix of anger and relief. Angry that they'd shown up to my home to ask for more. Relieved that I'd stood my ground again. I texted Danny. Parents showed up, wanted me to get Cameron a job at my company. His response, please tell me you told them where to shove it. More or less. Good man. Years 5 and 6 brought more of the same. Occasional messages from family members about how I was cruel for not helping Cameron. Updates through mutual friends about his continuing struggles. Hints that maybe if I just supported him back in college, things would be different. The revisionist history was impressive. In their version, I was the selfish brother who'd abandoned his family for career ambitions. Cameron was the dreamer who'd been crushed by a world that didn't appreciate his potential. Nobody wanted to admit the obvious. Cameron had been coddled, enabled, and set up to fail by parents who couldn't tell the difference between supporting a child and crippling them. I'm 28 now, making $115,000 a year as a senior project engineer. Just bought my first house, got engaged to a woman I met at a work conference, and I'm genuinely happy. My family still calls me selfish, still sends occasional messages about how Cameron's struggling and could I please just send some money or make an introduction or give him another chance. I don't respond to any of it. Last month, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. She asked about my family, and I gave the vague answer I'd perfected. Everyone's doing their own thing. Oh, I heard your brother's been having a tough time, she said with that sympathetic head tilt people do. Such a shame when young people can't find their way. Yeah, shame, I agreed. What I didn't say, Cameron's situation isn't bad luck or circumstances or a tough economy. It's the natural result of 25 years of learned helplessness and enablement. What I didn't say, sometimes the most selfish thing you can do is say no to people who want to pull you down to their level. What I didn't say, I spent years feeling guilty about choosing myself, and it was the best decision I ever made. My fiancée knows the story. She met my family exactly once at her insistence and came away understanding why I keep my distance. At dinner, Cameron spent an hour pitching her on his latest business idea, something about sustainable fashion and direct-to-consumer models. My parents watched adoringly while he talked, completely oblivious to her polite disinterest. On the drive home, she said, "Now I get it. Your brother's not just unsuccessful, he's delusional. And your parents made him that way." Yep. And they wanted you to sacrifice your education to fund that delusion. Yep. Wow. Just wow. We don't visit them anymore. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said yes back in my junior year. If I'd dropped out, gotten a job, and poured my money into Cameron's venture, it would have failed. I know that with absolute certainty. Whatever startup he'd been planning would have collapsed within months, and I'd have been left with nothing. No degree, more debt, and a brother who'd blame me for not believing in him enough. I'd probably be working construction full-time now, watching my friends from college move up in their careers while I was stuck. Cameron would have moved on to his next idea, asking for more money, and my parents would still be disappointed in me for not being successful enough to keep supporting him. The guilt trips would have never stopped. They'd have found new reasons for me to sacrifice, new ways I wasn't doing enough for my family. Saying no wasn't selfish, it was survival.